are in listen-only mode.
Hi, this is Vince Esposito facilitating your sales process shouldn't end with the close. Um, I'm going to start off giving you a little background on Sandler, and then I'm going to jump into this topic today. So just to give you a little background on Sandler, we're a training organization that's been around for 40 years. We're in 31 countries, and we deliver our training through 265 training centers around those countries. And that amounts to about 475,000 hours of coaching and training each year. And we consider ourselves to be experts in leadership, sales management, sales, customer service, and I think our clients do as well, which speaks to the amount of training centers and hours that we work with every year. With Sandler, we really like to provide a system for folks to follow. And our system, as depicted here on this submarine, and I can go into a lot of detail about the submarine, but I'm not going to, but it is a seven-step process. And if you look at the end of the submarine, you see that post-sell is the last step. And that would come right after fulfillment. What we call fulfillment, you might call as the close. And we've added this extra step called post-sell because we think it's extremely important, especially in an industry like insurance where there's an incumbent and/or competitors that you're going against each time. And we believe that the post-sale step is often overlooked and can come back and really haunt you, and you could lose deals that had been verbally given to you as a case. And in fact, I'll share a story that I used to be in the insurance industry here in Kentucky, and before I got involved with Sandler, one of the first deals that I had closed was a large manufacturing concern in western Kentucky, and I had a check for $30,000 or $35,000 that I was bringing back to get the wheels in motion and get it going. And this was back before cell phones were so prevalent. So I'm driving back. I get back to my office. I see there's a voicemail. I check it, and it's the person I had gotten the check from said, "Don't cash that check." And I'm crushed. I mean, what do you mean don't cash that check? So come to find out that he called the incumbent to let him know that he was switching. The incumbent didn't send me a congratulatory note, said, "You know what, I'm sorry to hear that. Let me come in. Let me talk with you, make sure we make it a smooth transition because I really appreciate your business over the years, and I want to make sure everything goes well." And as he got in, he ended up winning the business back. And I think, for those of us that have been in insurance, that's not uncommon because most folks have an incumbent they're dealing with. Also, as I work with other companies now from all different types of industries, from database management, IT, roofing, who have welders. I work with the gamut of different type of sales, and a lot of those struggle with post-sale as well, and it comes more from a competitor sometimes and/or a decision maker that wasn't ferreted out. So that's what we're going to focus on today, and as we do that, I want you to think about this as your business and keep that mindset that what you do well, what you might do better, or what you could do different to help you be even more successful than you already are. That's how I look at things. I don't see it as a right and wrong or good or bad. I think obviously you folks have been doing this for a while and have a good book of business built up. So what we're trying to do is just give you some food for thought for different ways to do it. All right, so the focus is you shouldn't end with the close, and why you shouldn't end with the close. And we just talked about it. I think it's a rhetorical question. Anyone here ever have a deal or commitment, then the prospect backed out? And I've got my hand up in the air because, as I explained to you, that's happened to me. Now, I will say, in all honesty, not that it hasn't ever happened again, but it's been far and few between, and I think there's only one other I can remember where I had a deal and it ended up not going, and that was a situation where it was a different decision maker had to be checked with. So aside from the incumbent, here's some of the reason that I've heard why deals that you thought you had ended up not going. The first one was the incumbent. Second one is a competitor takes a deal away, because once again, they're not going to, when they get the call that, hey, thanks for providing the quote, but we're going to go with Vince over here, they don't just say, hey, that's great for Vince. They say, well, what could we have done differently? Let me look at it, and if I want to win your business, and they'll make any kind of last-minute plea they can. Delivery misunderstanding. So if you need a week to turn things around and the buyer thinks you need a day, that's a problem, and that can end up causing an issue with the deal, or vice versa. Here's the one, like I said, that I've got bitten in a couple years ago. Was there was another decision maker involved, and we actually ferreted that out once we had the deal done. But that happens, I think, a lot, where people say they're the decision maker until they say they're going to switch, and then someone says, hey, wait a second, did you think about that? And that leads to that whole discussion of did we do the right thing? And then I think there's a conceptual and technical component. The conceptual component is how our childhood scripts kind of teach us to react in certain situations. And as I said, I grew up. My dad is old school Italian, very disciplinarian. You didn't ask a lot of questions or question him as such, and you had to get creative if you did, and that bleeds over to me in my scripts, and it's something that I've had to work on in talking with people from a sales perspective, to be willing to have some difficult conversations to make sure we, number one, have the budget, and number two, we're going to be able to do a deal together. Then there's the technical side on what things to ask, what kind of questions should we ask, type of thing. But conceptual is, will you even ask those because you're unwilling to because of the concepts that you grew up with. All right, so once again, here's a couple things to consider. Buyer's remorse. I know we've heard the term, and I would bet that a lot of us have experienced this ourselves when we've bought something. We love to buy, hate to be sold, and after we've bought something, we might think, wow, that salesperson really overly influenced me. I really don't need this. So that's a real thing, and if you don't address it, at some point it's going to be addressed. Now, once again, it could be very moderate, where someone just says, I've been with them a long time, but I've made this decision, I feel good about it, I'm moving forward. It could be as simple as that. But if you don't address it, you'll never know. So you want to make sure that you talk about buyer's remorse with the new account as well. Here's some other things that, once again, we think that you need to be prepared for. They have to tell someone no. So when they do that, the discussion is going to happen with or without your input. And by without your input, meaning that you just put your head in the sand and don't think that's going to happen, and you don't coach them on it. So I'm going to tell you that you need to coach them and help set those expectations on how that meeting is going to go. Or you need to set expectations for delivery to make sure that you can hit the milestones that each of you think are fair. And then the last piece that I think is another thing we need to incorporate in post-sale is establish a service check. Even if you start off well with someone and things kind of go as we plan to start off, there could be a hiccup along the way after that, where a call isn't returned in the timely manner they thought it would be, or someone internally at your organization may not have gotten the full picture on the service, and what they didn't know it, but they're speaking out of turn, and that's left a little bit of a sour taste with either your buyer or someone in their organization that interfaces with your folks. And so, I always think it's great to set up a service check 30 days, 45 days out, depending on, you and your schedule and their schedule, to address that. And then also to set the stage when you set that meeting to say, now, if we're hitting the marks on service, as I believe we will be, then I'd also like to have a referral discussion at that point, and we can talk about some people that you might be able to introduce me to that I can help them and they can help me. Um, and you know, in today's world with social media, LinkedIn and Facebook especially, and more even LinkedIn, you can go on. You should connect with the person if especially if you're in a position where you're winning business. Even prior to that, through the process, you probably should reach out to them as well. But once you connect, then you can go on to their contacts and you can look and see and check some people that you think might be a good fit for you. And we talked about referrals last time when I did a training webinar, and you know we talked about knowing your best client profile, because that's who you want to focus on when you're asking for these referrals. And you want to be pretty targeted when you're asking for referrals, not just, hey, you know anybody? Hey, John, do you know anybody that has a company that has 50 employees or 20 employees or whatever, once again, your sweet spot is, but be very specific with that because that'll help them focus on people that they may know. All right, so here's the conceptual. Like I said, in my house growing up with my dad, it would have been thought rude or ill-advised for me to question someone who's decided to give me business. I should just say thank you very much and leave as fast as I can. And in Sandler, we teach that you nurture it, you thank them very much for the business, but then you say, hey, can we talk about a couple things before I leave? Because experience tells me if we talk about these now, it may save us both some time later on. And I've never had a buyer yet tell me no to that type of question. Or the thought that you can't interfere with the discussion they will have with their incumbent or the competition, that's not your place. Well, that's burying your head in the sand, and you're not going to win business that way. You're just going to open yourself up for the opportunity to lose it. There is going to be a discussion of some type. Now, sometimes, it could be scorched earth and they're not going to have a great discussion. That's fine. But once again, you're leaving that to risk if you don't have a discussion about it. And fast forward, I told you the deal I lost. There was one that I won here in Louisville where I had that discussion. It was actually the next deal that I did. I had that discussion with the buyer, and we talked through now, hey, when you call your current broker, tell them that you're switching over to us. Experience tells me they're not going to send me a nice thank you note. And he laughed. And I said, in all seriousness, let's talk through that a little bit, how that's going to go, and let's make sure that I've covered any issues that you want to have covered so you're comfortable with them and we didn't miss something. Are you okay to do that? And he was like, yeah. So we talked through it from start to finish again, hitting highlights why they were changing because they thought this program was going to be better and how that discussion might go. Well, as is the case in insurance, when he called him, his broker said, hey, Bob, thanks for let me serve you for all those years. I'd like to come and make this a smooth transition. And because Bob and I had talked about that, he said, well, do you really need to do that? I think these are the things that you need, and I can give you those and get you an email with that information on it pretty quickly and give you the X dates and all this different thing. And the person kept going, and finally it got to be a shouting match where he was yelling at my new client, and my new client just reconfirmed his decision to leave. So, and it was because I coached him. Had I not coached him, it would have been like that first deal where the incumbent came in, sat down, had a nice even-keel discussion, and played on the relationship that they had, and I ended up losing the deal. Also, you want to be able to talk about transition plan. What is going to be the path? When do we have to? What are the timelines we need to hit? And then, once again, I strongly recommend you establish a checkup and referral meeting sometime in the future to have that discussion. All right, so here is kind of an overview of why your sales process shouldn't end with the close. These are the 3 keys that you want to keep in your mind to make sure that you're addressing when someone tells you yes. You want to have a discussion about preventing buyer's remorse, make sure they're good with it, or going to the competitor. I'm sure you had a few other people look at this when they call you and they start telling you that, well, they made a mistake, they could do better. how are we going to handle that? What kind of steps are we going to take? And then obviously with the incumbent. Now I know you've been with ABC for a long time. I really appreciate you moving my way, but how's that conversation going to be when you tell them you've decided to make this change? How can I help you make that easier? Establishing the ground rules is also important, once again, for timelines on what has to happen next to make sure that we hit the expectation, and who else is involved in this. Is there, there was a large company that I worked with on workers' comp. They had an on-site nurse, and when we had this discussion, he said, it would probably make sense for you to meet her first before we do this. And it was a good thing we did, because she had a strong relationship from a service perspective, not so much from a buying perspective or a sales perspective, but I was able to bring my service person in. They talked, they hit it off, and she was able to sign off on the transition very easily. And then the third piece is obtaining future business, and how you do that is, hey, let's set up a meeting where we can come in, we can talk about how things are going, make sure that the transition was smooth, and how you're feeling about that decision. And obviously at that point, I'd like to ask you about referrals if everything's good. My first emphasis would be to make sure that we're doing the service that we said we were, but if that's all good, then I am going to want to talk about maybe some other folks you can refer me to. And I think you established that upfront contract, and that'll help you. We see this as some strong pivot points. Once again, I'm not telling you, suggesting to you that you just change your process, because some of you have been very successful with the process you use, but I am asking you to keep an open mind and maybe consider some of the pivot points in your process, and if you're not using a post-sale step, maybe you want to incorporate that in. That's what I'm suggesting, and make that one of the pivot points that you really work on once you've got a deal that looks like it's closed. Here's I like to share whenever I do any type of training, top 10 sales behaviors, and you all might have a different type of philosophy on these, or might be in different stages, but I think these 10 have to be addressed. Lead generation is one, building relationships, qualifying the opportunity. If you remember back to the submarine I showed you, we did a lot of qualifying before we did a proposal. And then even after we did the proposal, we did some more qualifying with post-sale that we talked about. So we think that's really strong, making presentations, servicing your customers, account management, territory development. Building a cookbook, we believe this is a real strong piece too, that you have the behavior set up that you're going to follow to get you where you need to be for your goals and to have the level of success that you want to have. Continuous education. We think all the best sales folks, as well as other professionals, and if you look at sports for a moment, they all continue practicing and education to get better. And then the number 10 is, we think you need to have a system. I'm biased. I really buy into the Sandler system, but it doesn't have to be Sandler. And keep in mind that you can contact me by email at vesposito, ESPOSITO @sandler.com, or my phone number here in Louisville is 502-454-5454. If you have any questions after you've heard this, or any other questions that you you want to bring up and just didn't have the chance to do it today. So with that, I'd like to say I really appreciate your time. I know everyone's time is stretched these days. Hopefully you found this beneficial and valuable. And here's some other ways to contact me. You can go to my website, esposito.sandler.com. I gave you the email already, vesposito@sandler.com. You can hook up with me on Facebook at facebook.com/Sandler, EVG, all one word, or on LinkedIn at Vince Esposito 1, and that's all one word as well. Or I am on Twitter at Sandler EVG, hashtag Sandler EVG. Once again, thank you so much for your time. I've, as I said, had some experience in the insurance world. I know it's a very rewarding business, but very tough business. So I appreciate you all, and if I have helped in any way, I'm really grateful for that opportunity. Thank you so much.